Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom on the programme tonight. It's a 1-hour edition. First, the former Finance Minister P Chidambaram joins us on the massive rise in wholesale inflation. The government says the hike led by fuel prices is an aberration. We debate this. Next up, fans of Sushant Singh Rajput today marked a year to the day the popular Bollywood actor was found dead at age 34 in his Mumbai apartment. It's a tragedy that left the country in shock in the middle of a COVID lockdown. Now, the Mumbai police which first investigated the death, said that the actor had died by suicide. But then Sushant's father filed a case against his son's girlfriend, Riya Chakrabarti, accusing her of mentally harassing Sushant, taking his money and driving him to suicide. But so many agencies, drugs, the ED, the CBI, where is that case today? That's going to be the second focus tonight. And finally, there are those who say it's not a question of if, but a question of when India has a third wave of COVID. This is a lull, many people believe. It's great the numbers are going down. It's great that we are safer today than we were a few weeks back, but there could well be a third wave. So we analyze how this may actually happen and how and which states may end up being worse off in December if vaccination doesn't go up massively. You ask, why December? Because that's pretty much a target by which we want all adult Indians to be vaccinated. But first, our top story, the state of the economy and the record wholesale inflation in May, which stands at 12.9%. May's wholesale inflation spikes to 12.9 versus 10.4 a month back. Now, this is bad news because it has, besides anything else, been triggered by fuel and power. And the argument which has been made is that there is an impact of fuel on just about every aspect of the economy and costs. So while it may have been led by fuel, the impact would be felt far and wide. 37.6 versus 20.9 in the month of April. So economists say that the rise in oil prices, the weaker rupee and upward revision in fuel rates remain key risk factors going forward. But government sources have in fact come out with some details. They say that, look, it's not all that bad. They say this is primarily due to a 37.6% yearly increase in fuel and power and inflation, that some of the other variables, which they point out, have not really been impacted. This is an anomaly due to a low base effect and a rise in prices of crude. And essentially what they're trying to say is that the percentage rise, while it's correct, statistically relevant, is somewhat exaggerated given the layer from which it actually came. So an increase in fuel prices will have a limited impact on people's pockets, the government argues, due to restricted movement on the back of regional lockdowns. There are others who would argue that, look, that's just not the case, because you can't have one national statement saying that people weren't traveling during this entire period. Some states are very different from others, and movement in some areas, large parts of our country, have in fact taken place. So the responsibility of states, the government argues, is to rationalize tax on petrol and diesel to control this increase. But what about the role of the centre? Because taxes are also taken by the centre for petrol, diesel and other fuels. So shouldn't you be leading by example? Fuel prices in metro cities, just look at these fuel prices. Mumbai, just under 103 rupees a litre of petrol. That is humongous, and that is a problem which affects so many people, particularly at a time when India is unlocking. Mumbai certainly is unlocking, but all across the prices of petrol so very high, and also diesel. Remember the times when diesel was 20 rupees plus cheaper than petrol? Not so anymore. So those are a couple of key points. Now, I did speak to the former Finance Minister, Mr. P Chidambaram. I'm going to play out that, and then we're going to have a debate on these wholesale prices. What does it actually indicate? Where exactly are we placed? Joining us now, Mr. P Chidambaram, the former Finance Minister of India, Rajya Sabha MP of the Congress Party. Thanks so very much for being with us. Yes. Now, the government says the rise in the wholesale price index is caused by an aberration due to a low base effect and a rise in crude petroleum, mineral oils, furnace oils, etc. How would you react to this, that there was a low base effect, which is why this is being, it's exaggerated in a sense in the way that it appears?
This government's economic policy is an aberration. Everything that goes wrong is an aberration. And everything will go wrong if your basic analysis of the economy is wrong. You just now said, and I heard you say that, crude oil prices have gone up, the value of the rupee is depreciated, and on the back of that, if you increase fuel prices practically every day, or every other day certainly, there will be inflation, which is why the fuel and power basket, you didn't say the number, it is 37.61%.
Yeah.
If fuel and power is 37.61%, it has got a cascading effect on every price. Vegetable, fruit, transport, travel, every price has a cascading effect. Unlike some other price rises, any increase in the price of fuel has a huge cascading effect.
Okay.
I think this elementary economics is completely escaping the government.
So here's something else which they've said, and my questions are based largely on an explanation provided by the government on these prices. So this is something else they've said. They've said since the movement of people has been restricted due to regional lockdowns, the increase in fuel prices will have a limited impact on the pockets of people. How would you respond?
This is complete rubbish. The lockdown conditions are different from state to state. For example, in Tamil Nadu, there is no restriction on intra-district movement. There is few restrictions on inter-district movement. Trains are running, aeroplanes are running, maybe a limited number. So depends on the restrictions in different states. There is no uniform set of restrictions all over the country. So how does the government of India make a claim that movement has been restricted all over India?
Okay. They say it is additionally the responsibility of states to rationalize the tax on petrol and diesel to control these prices, and therefore to enable and facilitate the movement of people. How much leeway do states have in terms of taxation on fuel and diesel?
Very little, and I'll tell you why. I'm not denying that states have also imposed taxes, but they have followed the pattern of the central government. And why have they imposed taxes? Let me give you just some numbers. The cost of crude oil plus refinery cost plus commission, dealer's commission, comes to about 40 rupees a litre. On that, the central government has imposed a tax of 32 rupees. Much of it is cess, which is not shared with the state government. If you imposed it directly as an excise duty and shared it with the state governments don't have to impose additional taxes. Once they get a very small share, a pittance, according to the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister, he gets something like 1.5 rupees out of 33. Therefore, the states have no option but to impose taxes. You show the way by reducing the taxes on petrol and diesel, and then there is moral pressure on the states also to make a proportionate reduction in the taxes imposed by the state.
Yeah.
In fact, the Tamil Nadu has said, we will reduce petrol and diesel prices by reducing our tax. Their budget is due in about 10 days. We'll have to wait for the budget. But then why doesn't the central government show the way by reducing the prices, reducing the taxes on petrol and diesel?
No, you make an important point, because the prices of taxes, the prices of fuel and diesel need to be rationalized. I was just going through some numbers. In Delhi, for example, petrol is at 96 rupees a litre, of which taxes are at 52.7%. That's incredible.
Correct.
Now, obviously, centre and state. Now, diesel in Delhi, 87 rupees a litre, taxes are at 39%. So, and then of course there is a dealer commission also, which is a certain charge that goes in. So when one talks about rationalizing fuel prices, it needs to be done holistically, right? Would you agree that? But you say that the centre needs to set the example.
Look at the numbers on your screen.
Yeah.
If you add these crude and dealer commission, as I said, it comes to about 40 rupees a litre.
Yeah.
Centre's taxes is 32 rupees. State taxes are 12.50. So you show the way by reducing your taxes and then pressure builds on the state government to make a proportionate reduction. But if you don't reduce the taxes, why would the state reduce the taxes?
Okay.
You are the central government.
Let's look at a few of the other points which have come up. They say that the month-over-month change in the wholesale production index for the month of May this year as compared to April last month was just 0.76%.
See, this month-on-month, year-on-year is very deceptive. More and more economists are now looking at sequential, month by month or quarter by quarter. See, these are playing with numbers. Yes, year-on-year, month-on-month has a certain relevance, but that's not the only comparison you should make. You should also look at it sequentially, month after month after month. So what was May compared to April of this year? What was April compared to March? You see, when I spend money, when inflation pinches me, I'm not looking at last May, I'm looking at last month.
Right.
I'm looking at last week, isn't it? Therefore, look at it sequentially. If you look at it sequentially, this is the fifth straight month in which WPI spiked. Yeah. So January, February, March, April, May.
So it's not enough to say it's gone up narrowly over last month. You have to look at the trend, right? It's also gone up over the previous 4 months prior to that as well.
It's an increase, isn't it?
I didn't see that number. Thanks, Mr. Chidambaram, for pointing it out. Also, food inflation has remained, this is what they're saying, food inflation has remained under control, limiting pressure on the vulnerable section of our society.
No, I don't. Food inflation, according to the numbers put out today, is about 4.31%. So 4% on food inflation is pretty high because the bulk of the domestic expenditure is on food for the lower middle class and the poor classes. As much as 60-70% is on food, and that inflation is pretty high. I just want to add another thought, and you might want to take it forward with other participants. You see, because of the wrong fiscal policy, they are not willing to do a fiscal expansion. You are tying the hands of the RBI. RBI is unable to depart from its accommodative monetary policy. RBI can raise bank rates a little to control inflation, but only if some of the lifting is done by the fiscal side. If the fiscal side won't do any lifting, the entire burden falls on the RBI.
Now they say, as far as food prices, they've said the food index, which consists of food articles from the primary articles group and food products from the manufactured products group, have decreased by 0.19% from 158.9 in April to 158.6. So it's very small, but they say it's gone down.
Look at the numbers I have. Pulses inflation is 9.39%. Edible oil is 30%. So what does the average homemaker consume? Pulses, edible oil, apart from cereal. Therefore, if pulses and edible oil are 9.3 and 30%, see, food is a big basket.
Right.
It includes even exotic things like dates and figs and chocolate milk. That's not the way to look at it. Look at the breakdown of the food inflation. Look at the items which are consumed by the poor, the lower middle class and the middle class. Pulses and edible oils 9.39 and 30%. That puts a huge burden upon the average homemaker belonging to the middle class and the poorer sections.
One or two final questions. They say that amidst the rising fuel prices, the railways has been able to support logistics efforts in a cost-efficient manner, and primarily because of a significant portion of the network has been electrified, thereby insensitive to rising diesel prices. So they're basically saying that as far as the government, the railways are part of the government, is concerned, they are less impacted in the railways for the movement of essential items and goods because of electrification.
You can't look at it like you take a snapshot. The railway finances have
cherry-picking information is what you're suggesting.
Yes. Railway information has to be tested at the end of the year when we see the railway's receipts and expenditure. If the railway is making huge losses or is borrowing money through the Railway Finance Corporation, that puts pressure on the fisc, isn't it? Therefore, don't look at, I've reduced platform ticket by 1 rupee. That is not the way to look at data. These are all data scraps. The entire railway data will have to be seen at the end of the year, whether the railway has functioned efficiently as well as profitably. That has to be seen at only the end of the year. It can't be seen every week or every month.
All right, Mr. Chidambaram, they're basically suggesting that the government's defense was cherry-picking data to suggest that the situation as far as the wholesale price index was concerned wasn't necessarily so bad. For their views, I'm joined by Rajat Sethi and Yamini Iyer. I'd like to thank both of you very much for being with us. Do we have Rajat as yet, or we just try and get Rajat in a moment from now? Yamini, there are those who suggest that if you look at these numbers, it's essentially just fuel which has affected this particular situation. And so the central argument being made by the government is that, look, this is an aberration because of the low base upon which it started. Is there merit in this argument?
Vishnu, first of all, I'm not representing any government's view or any opposition view.
No. I introduced you as Yamini. I'm happy to say my friend Yamini, but
I didn't hear. No, I think to the larger point that the government's defense falls flat in the face of the reality of what the economy is confronting. A month-on-month look is not good enough in the context of the kind of severe shock that the economy has seen. We've seen a steady rise of the whole price index over the last 6 months of this year. In the context of the second surge, where you have the government itself doesn't have its own data on what kind of impact the second surge has had on incomes. The overall consequences of inflation on the economy are significant and severe, and they need to be dealt with a holistic approach rather than a nitpicking of data to give an explanation of month on month. We have to look at it from a much more broader perspective.
Rajat, the point mentioned by Mr. Chidambaram just a few moments back is that if you've got a huge rise in fuel prices, there will be a knock-on effect in other parts of the economy. You cannot just say that these numbers were high as a result of fuel and power. It's all linked, and therefore, the impact in other sectors, including food, will go up over a period of time.
Well, clearly, there is nothing to disagree with on this point, because petrol and diesel are important input costs, which gets affected into various products, wherein logistical costs are a significant portion of the final price. So on that point, I do agree. And international crude has also gone up. If you see the OPEC meetings and all, and the kind of projections that we have, the international crude price will continue to rise in the coming months. So that's part A. Part B, that what Mr. Chidambaram was pointing out was food inflation at 4% appeared quite high to him. But I just wanted to highlight that during the UPA days, when he was the finance minister, food inflation was at the rate of 13.5%. And it remained consistently for several years, 3 or 4 years. Food inflation remained at least in double digits, ranging from 10% to 14%.
That's true.
And this is one of the reasons why the UPA lost elections. And I think if you look at the current data which has been released for this month, the WPI and the retail inflation both highlighted two competing forces. First are these international commodity prices, which are high, the logistical costs because of crude, etc., trying to pull the inflation on the higher side, whereas you have a little lower consumption happening because of lockdown, where the consumption overall has gone down. You would see there will be a corresponding reduced, or rather a less translation from the WPI to the CPI. The consumer price index still remains around 6%, which is high if you look at the trajectory that Prime Minister Modi's government has consistently maintained throughout the past 7 years, which has been on an average between 2 to 4%. From that perspective, it is slightly high, but it is clearly not in the red zone.
Yamini, the other key point is rationalization of fuel prices. For too long, we've heard this argument in the last couple of years that you can't do anything in a decentralized situation. Market prices are, oil prices are determined by the market now, right? However, the taxation structure is fundamentally wrong. And it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? That, you know, I mean, you'll have the centre, which even today have said, look, it's for the states to rationalize prices. And then you've got a Mr. Chidambaram saying that, no, the centre has to lead by example. So, I mean, aren't both sides a party to the mess? Because it's hurting the common person now.
Well, both sides are party to the mess in the sense that even the RBI has said that the centre and states need to work together to be able to rationalize fuel taxes. The problem is that the centre itself has not done itself any favors by consistently failing to live up to its own commitments on cooperative federalism and create an environment for centre and state cooperative and coordinated action on this. If you look at how the centre has been responding, particularly the practice of shifting taxes on petrol and diesel that are shareable with states into and converting them into cesses to be able to ring-fence its own revenues, leaving states with relatively fewer options. If you look at the overall dynamics of center-state fiscal devolution, states have been squeezed. So that does give states an upper hand in terms of the negotiation by arguing that you've left us with relatively little choice. Now, politically, of course, all Indian political parties worry about inflation, and that itself often serves as a check and balance. But at this moment in time, we need the centre and state to be able to come to the negotiation table and collectively work out something. And the centre does, I think, have to lead the way, particularly against the backdrop of its practice of shoring up revenues through cesses.
Rajat, last question to you. You know, economists have reacted to what's happening, and they've been saying that the rise in oil prices, the weaker rupee, and an upward revision in fuel rates remain risk factors going forward. Isn't it important to actually not downplay the significance of these numbers? The petrol prices, diesel prices are skyrocketing absolutely. Wholesale index, you know, going up over a period of time as the economy tries to get out of this mess because of COVID. How much trouble is the common person in?
See, petrol prices, the fuel prices largely have been on an upward trajectory. The government hasn't increased any of the cesses or the excise duties on top of the existing rates that was declared at the time of budget. So, I mean, think from the government standpoint, they have earmarked all the expenses that they have to incur in the financial year, and they need to also account for the fact that because of lockdown, though intermittent lockdown this time, yet there was lockdown and it would impact the government's revenues. They have to look at avenues from where they can fit their kitty and incur or at least balance out for those expenditures in the future. Therefore, I don't foresee that government would be reducing the excise duty. It doesn't seem logical at this stage. But I do agree that it is going to pinch the common man, and they will have to wait for some foreseeable time till the time the international crude prices don't start getting onto a lower trajectory.
Yeah. Well, I'm out of time, Yamini. Sorry, I got to end this. I got to wrap this up now. I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us. I think it is a shared concern, these prices, particularly at a situation like this. We'll take a short break. Up after that. A couple of other important debates, including one on Sushant Singh Rajput. It's been a year since he died. Where are those investigations that dominated the news last year? Coming up. Fans of Sushant Singh Rajput today marked a year to the day the popular Bollywood actor was found dead at the age of 34 in his Mumbai apartment, a tragedy that left the country in shock in the middle of COVID-19, in the middle of this lockdown. The Mumbai police, which first investigated the death, said that the actor had died by suicide. Last year, soon after the actor's death, his father filed a case against his son's girlfriend, the actor Riya Chakrabarti, accusing her of mentally harassing Sushant Singh Rajput, taking his money, driving him to suicide. The investigation soon became mired in a series of controversies, including a politically charged standoff between the Bihar and Mumbai police, and devolved into a multi-agency probe that saw the CBI, the ED, the Narcotics Control Bureau all file separate cases. 1 year down the road, where exactly are we? Joining us now, the actor and advocate and activist Kanika Sadanand, Sanjay Hegde, the senior advocate of the Supreme Court, also with us. The film critic Mayank Shekhar also joins us. And in the next few moments, we'll be joined by Vikas Singh, senior Supreme Court advocate, who was the family lawyer of Sushant Singh Rajput's family. Kanika, let me come to you first. Now, it was on the 8th of August last year that the CBI registered a case. They questioned Riya, her brother, her father, along with Sushant Singh's staff. As I understand it, they haven't arrested anyone and they just don't appear to have any evidence at all. What does this indicate?
It obviously indicates, Vishnuji, that they have found nothing to say that it was a murder, because if they had, they would have by now at least arrested somebody, or they would have made a statement. In fact, the CBI is saying that they need more time. So if it was not a murder and if it was suicide, we should have some closure on it. And it's very clear that they obviously don't, or they are under the pressure from the government not to release a statement or not to give any kind of final verdict on it. Something is not right. And I think it's time the family, the fans, and even Riya needs closure on this. You know, it has to conclude soon.
Mr. Hegde, there was also an ED case. They took cognizance of the Bihar police's FIR. They initiated a money laundering probe focusing on allegations of 15 crores being siphoned off Sushant Singh Rajput's bank accounts. Where is that now? Has anything come off that? Was this money stolen?
To the best of my information, there was nothing which was found missing. Ms. Chakravarti and her lawyers seem to have put all that out into the public domain as well. Actually, there was no case to begin with, in as much as if the death was not suicidal, then and only then could a case have proceeded for investigation or for registration of an FIR.
Right.
The Bombay police who were the first people on the spot found it to be suicidal. The family first cooperated with the Bombay police, but they did not tell the Bombay police that they were aware of the person's history of mental illness. They did not even tell the Bombay police about their own attempts to medicate him upon the advice of Delhi doctors. There was a lot of concealment. There were the Bihar elections at that point of time. There was a DGP who wanted to gain the ticket of a particular party. It was a perfect storm. And as you said, you mentioned it, it was in the beginning of the lockdown. So it made for endless debates on television, and the whole nation got hooked. But at the end of the day, it appears to have been subject to correction. There is nothing which says that it was not a suicide. And we missed one major opportunity, the opportunity to talk about mental health issues.
Yeah.
We have trivialized it. We have gone all over the place about, no, look how he was smiling in this photograph, how could he be depressed? This is such a major opportunity to talk about depression, about how to deal with those who are struggling to fight, and how not to interfere with professionals who are giving the patient therapy or prescribing medication.
Sure. Mr. Vikas Singh, you're joining us now. The bottom line, according to AIIMS doctors as well, as we understand it, is that this was a case of death by suicide. This being the case, and this has been repeated so many times, does everything else fall apart? The CBI case, the Enforcement Directorate case, none of them have showed any progress, have they? 1 year down the road.
So, as far as suicide is concerned, if you will recall, Vishnu, the father's FIR was abetment to suicide. So even if we accept, let me assume everything in favor of what AIIMS is saying is correct, then the abetment to suicide will definitely be there, because abetment to suicide is something which is very subjective.
Right.
And the subjectivity is of such a high order that it has to go to trial. No prosecution or a investigating agency can close a abetment to suicide case when the circumstances that have been made out by the family clearly point out that is the case of abetment to suicide. For example, if you will recall that Riya had, cut off everybody from the family, changed the servants, did not tell the family. So the family was aware that he was suffering from anxiety, but family was not aware that he was suffering from some severe disease. And the prescriptions were never shared with the family. The doctors, whomever she was showing to, taking to Sushant to, was never told to the family. So the was never aware that this kind of seriousness is there in the disease. So if it is abetment to suicide, and that is why I personally feel that the fact that CBI is taking time means that they are looking at the murder angle, because otherwise abetment to suicide charge sheet could have been filed in a couple of days, because simply by looking into the FIR, because whatever the family has said. So there has to be some angle which the CBI is looking at. The only thing
even 1 year later, sir,
no, of course, 1 year later. If you will recall, in the Arushi Talwar case, they hurriedly did a charge sheet and accused the parents. And what happened? The real culprits went free. They went away to Nepal, and nothing is heard of them, and they are not going for trial.
So you believe that the time shouldn't be a factor.
Go the same way. It should be done. It should be done in a more meticulous manner. The only worry that I have is that till date the CBI has not taken anybody in for custodial interrogation, and that is something which is a little disappointing. So I hope that CBI has got some electronic trail or some other evidence on the basis of which it is not going for abetment to suicide and is thinking of something more serious. So let's see, and we are quite hopeful. The family is quite hopeful, because CBI was our choice. We had asked the Supreme Court to send it to the CBI. We had gone to Patna Police. And you have seen how the Mumbai police has behaved, and you have seen, after all, what has Parambir Singh done. And Parambir Singh, the Commissioner of Police today, after 30 Mumbai police, he says that I don't have faith in the Mumbai police anymore. So,
all right, sir, you mentioned lots of points. I just want to quickly go across to Mayank Shekhar. I'm running short on time.
Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you.
Mayank, wasn't this one of the worst moments ever that we've seen as far as the way in which it was covered, where this entire death was trivialized? There were opportune news anchors. There was the worst of the TRP business, and it took out the soul of what journalism is meant to be in our country, which is essentially about justice.
Absolutely, Vishnu, and I think it's also a test case where it seemed like there's actually a volume button and someone is behind it, and they can magnify anything that they want the public to talk about. Even when there's a flood, there's a COVID, there's incursion from the neighboring country, etc. But that's what you want everyone to talk about, and they can actually.
There was an incursion from China happening. This is our territory.
Exactly.
And then we were talking about this. We weren't. We were talking about China. Right. But others were.
And also, Vishnu had told us a couple of other things. One is how susceptible people are to conspiracy theories, and you can literally sell them anything and it starts getting circulated, and that's what we saw. That was the social media part of it. Of course, that was also being run by troll armies and organized, there was organized, cells operating for this particular case. And the third, of course, is television news. I mean, for God's sake, for the first time you realize that actually someone can get on before the camera and spout lies, blatant untruths, make insinuations night after night after night, and frame a wrong question and debate it every night. And I think, as the late Vinod Mehta once said, it's like credibility is like virginity, you only use it once. And I think television news certainly lost its credibility.
It almost seemed to be, if you lie enough times, then it becomes the truth. It just seemed that was the way it turned out. It was absolutely obnoxious. It was unbelievable. And we are still here 1 year later with two cases, ED, CBI, no progress whatsoever. Karika, I'm coming to you next. Do make your point, but my question was this. The NCB, the Narcotics Bureau, they've arrested 35 individuals, including Ria, her brother. They're out on bail now. They filed a charge sheet, and blaming her about Sushant Singh Rajput's drug procurement and consumption. Do you believe that there is anything in this case that is substantive, or this is also something which is weak?
So with the NCB case and the 27A, the 8C, or whatever sections that they put against, I don't remember them clearly right now. Obviously, they have not been able to prove those sections that they had put on these accused or whatever, Ria and the other people. I don't know what the reason for Pithani's arrest has been, because I have not been following it recently. But Pithani has been arrested, so there must be some clue that they got somewhere, from whether it was from electronic, digital, or some kind of, information that they've got. So, but the point is that if NCB is going to take so long to cover a case like this, where there's a whole net of people that they said were involved, it's a huge, it was almost like they were making them look all like a drug cartel, the film industry. And they made such a big hue and cry about it. And if they've still not reached to the bottom, then again that just shows that it was all, just for TRPs, just for visuals. And the worst thing I wanted to say, Vishnu, here is that the objectification of a woman, even if she is an accused, she has the right that she's not guilty until she has been given her time in court, or the case has been tried. But the way there was a cheap drama going on every night on television, and some channels were using such horrible pictures, showing her body and talking about and cursing her, abusing her, trolling her, life-threatening, and this is very sad. Media trial is the worst thing that can happen in a democracy. Yeah. It is out in any kind of state, in any state. Yeah. Media trial can definitely pervert the whole mindset. They can bias the whole system, and this should stop. And definitely objectification. Has anybody said sorry to Ria in 1 year? Nobody is, and the anchor who gained so much popularity from this TRPs and whatever, he's not even doing a program today. Where the hell is he?
Right.
They've all disappeared.
Look, I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. I think it's sad in a way that 1 year later we continue to discuss this, but because it's a failure of justice at so many levels, and it's a failure of our media, of our system, that we continue to do this. But I'd like to thank you all. Hopefully there will be justice in this case, justice for Ria. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. A lot of people have said that given the numbers that we are seeing presently as far as new COVID cases are concerned, the falling rate of deaths in this country, we are clearly out of the second wave, and that it's all over, it's getting better, unlockdown has started. Well, unfortunately, the truth is that while these numbers may be great right now, there is a very real fear that India is headed to a third COVID wave. This isn't some sort of effort by us to exaggerate a scenario, but these are experts, and many have said that it is almost inevitable. Why? Because the rate of vaccination is nowhere close to where it needs to be. So we actually sat down and tried to project onwards what the situation is in various states, which states are more vulnerable, which states are better off. We looked at the number of people who have actually been vaccinated in these states presently, and then trying to, in other words, the rate of vaccination for 2 doses, and then project beyond and to the month of December. Why December? Simply because it is in the month of December that the government has said that all adults should be vaccinated in this country. Let's bring up the first graphic that we have. So this one actually identifies hotspots in all parts of the country. Can we have that up full screen? Let's have that up full screen. All right. So essentially the severity depends on the vaccination rate. Yeah, this is much more clear. Now this says slow vaccination rate. What does that mean? It means that if we continue to vaccinate people at the present rate of vaccination, then there will be hotspots in 99% of our country in a third wave of COVID, which affects 1.39 billion people. Look at all those states. Those are many of the largest states in the country, and they're all marked red because they're all going to have hotspots. What we are vaccinating now is nowhere close to where we need to be. But what if we do step up the rate of vaccination? Now, if we do step up the rate of vaccination to 6 million a day, then you're going to end up seeing a differential situation, where from 1.39 billion people being badly affected, potentially it's down to 750 million. Now in this there's green, there is yellow or amber and red. 17% of India, based on their rate of vaccination thus far, would be okay. The number of infections would be considerably lower. But then 54% of India, just look at the bottom right hand side of your screen, in that graphic would be badly impacted. In these states, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Kerala, Bengal, Bihar, UP and Telangana would be very, very badly affected still. So no good, because these are very large states. But if we did actually go to 9 million vaccines a day, the number of people impacted 400 million, right? So look at the number of green states, so much larger, 31% of India relatively safe. The number of those states badly affected right there in the bottom of your screen at about 21%, 36 odd percent of India in that yellow. So it's a bit convoluted in terms of all the names of states over there, but the bottom line is this: look at the extreme left. As many as 1.39 billion people could be impacted with a slow rate of present vaccination. That goes down to 750 million people who could be impacted. It goes down further to 400 million people. And the number of hotspots comes down dramatically. So that's what we want, to step up vaccination, even with 9 million a day. As you can see, a large part of our country still very, very vulnerable. Well, joining us now, Dr. Fahim Yunus. We're also joined by Dr. Mohammad Rafiq, Dr. Shurunjit Chatterjee and Dr. Lee Mang Yan also with us. Dr. Yunus, is a third wave inevitable in India?
I think that's a tough question. The way I look at it is, unless 40, 50, 60%, a large number of population is not vaccinated, any country will be vulnerable to more waves.
Dr. Mohammad Rafiq, what's the magic number we are looking for? Because, you know, Dr. Fauci in the US said, you need to be vaccinated, you need to have vaccinated 80% of your target group, then there'd be some sort of a herd immunity. Lots of people have had COVID and therefore you'd be safe. But that's a huge number. That's a huge number. Now, short of that, what is the minimum percent in India that we need to sort out, right, to say that we can get rid of our masks in this country, at least in some places?
Actually, going to the India situation, I think if we can try to vaccinate at least 60 to 70%, because herd immunity starts coming in at some after vaccination by around 60 to 70% of the population gets vaccinated. Actually, in UAE, in that way, we are feel that it's much better because the vaccination rates have been pretty good. And the target vaccination which they're planning to achieve is about 100% by the end of this year. And at this rate of about 135 doses for 100 people, I think pretty much we are doing strong in this. But if you ask me about herd immunity, I think about 60 to 70% in India should at least give a very comfortable feeling.
Dr. Yunus, is that the big fear that you know, there's going to be a variable situation in India, places like Delhi, a few other states which are more conscientious in the process of vaccination, right, or Mumbai, a big city, people would be better off there, whereas other parts, states where people are not vaccinating in the rate that they need to, Uttar Pradesh, for example, huge state, huge population, we'd be in deep trouble.
That is correct. I think virus's risk is asymmetric and vaccines benefit is also asymmetric. So the good thing here is you have to look at it a little bit more nuanced, which means there is no magic number at 70%, which means at 69% we are vulnerable and at 71% we are made of titanium. It doesn't work that way. In US currently, our country is at 52% vaccination. And I used to see about 75 patients with COVID in our hospital every day. My group, that's how many patients we had in our hospital every day. Today we have one COVID patient in our hospital. Wow. And that person also not vaccinated. We are at 50% in the country. So I think I want to make sure we understand that with every person who gets vaccinated, you're getting closer and closer to that number. Another factor to consider, once you're at, let's say, 30%, another 10, 20, 30% of India is probably already recovered from COVID. Yeah. And will as susceptible. So the situation is not as gloomy. I think you got to stay at that 7 to 10 million vaccinations a day. That is the main focus. If you can stay on it, you'll get there.
Yeah. Dr. Lee Mang Yan, in a country like India where we have this huge population burden and not enough vaccines presently, and even if we get enough vaccines, just administering them, it's so difficult, right? In a situation like this, is a single dose vaccine, whether it's an injection or hopefully a nasal vaccine, very much a solution. It helps in every respect. You need only one dose. Its administration is faster. And, it seems, is that the way forward for countries like India?
Hi, thank you for having me. So first, I want to stress that I'm the virologist working on vaccine development for 5 years in the WHO reference lab. I have my vaccine patent on pending. So I want to tell people, from the beginning, I tell people, don't expect a very safe and efficient vaccine in the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, I understand people's eager and their need to vaccine. If not, they have the panic. And in short term, the vaccine, if it's kind of from the good company, it can help people. But the thing is, first, this virus always circulating around populations, especially like in the country like India, you have such large population. So the mutant will go faster. Yes. And also this kind of vaccine, because lack of the experiment data and the lack of the safety proof from the human trial, there are a lot of potential risk. And the most important thing is, I think everyone should realize this is not the nature occurring virus. It is a virus after a lot of gain of function modification from the China military. So if you use your experience based on the nature occurring virus, like the seasonal influenza, and tell people to use the vaccine and even enhance the vaccine and again boost it, then you cannot overcome this virus.
That's interesting. Dr. Lee Mang-yan, are you suggesting, and I just want to get this right, that you believe that this came out of a lab, that there wasn't a transmission, between species, and therefore it's not natural? This is not natural? Is that what you're suggesting?
That is not only my belief. That is already been proved, and all the people insist on nature occurring. Until now, you say either they know they are wrong or they cannot prove anything, and so although they still stay with China government, try to tell people that's from nature. And that's how this virus is dangerous to people, because from the beginning, China designed this virus to make it look like from nature. Okay. And then when doctors, they use the nature virus experience to deal with this virus, it's not efficient. And I want to stress that we do have drugs. In China, military scientists apply patent for hydroxychloroquine to use for new purpose as anti-COVID back to last February. So many drugs we can use. We should develop the drugs protocol to treat people, especially early treatment. Okay. Vaccine can be a helpful thing, but not all.
Okay, that's really important points over there and fascinating. Dr. Chatterjee, last question to you. If you can wrap this up for us, are we going to face a third wave in India? And what is your personal opinion on children being more vulnerable? I know the government has said that may not necessarily be the case. What is your view on this?
See, I'm very afraid the way things are being opened up. I think the opening up should be really gradual. We have really suffered a very bad second wave recently. You see the markets today, you see our hospital today, it is all crowded from day 2 itself. If the citizens of this country don't take care of this, we are again going to be in trouble, and third wave is really imminent then, and then we'll be in deep trouble. Obviously, we should start preparing how to face the third wave if it comes through. And we have to be, the government as well as the citizens of this country have to be really careful that we don't go through again the same sort of events that we faced during the second wave. Now, as far as children thing goes, as far as history goes, in a pandemic situation, what happens is in the first wave, mostly the elderly people are affected. The second wave, the younger people are affected. The third wave, it is quite a few times children who get affected. But it is not necessarily true that it will follow the same pattern, but there is always a risk that the children might get affected more during the third wave.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. I think Dr. Chatterjee's message that we just have to tighten up and sharpen up, be smart about protecting ourselves. Otherwise, let's face it, we're in deep trouble in India. That's a message we will keep repeating. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. Out of time. Goodbye.